Hey Chris, it's Maria from B&H. I wanted to see if you had time for 21 questions.
Dude, stoked to have you here. This is rad. This is some of my favorite stuff to talk about, and I'm hyped to give a few answers.
Amazing. All right, so let's jump right in. So tell us, what type of photographer are you?
My work as a photographer, it kind of oscillates back and forth between commercial work and sometimes adventure photography, I guess you could say, a bit of action sports, but I think the primary focus of all of it is landscapes. That's what I love, and that's, I think, at the heart of everything I try to do.
What got you started in photography and video?
I got started in photography purely just wanting to document my friends running up and down the beach in coastal California. I grew up near the beach, and I think that when I picked up a camera, it was like, that was the way for me to kind of fit in with this group of people and be the documentarian, come away with the stories. And I think ultimately, I didn't really get into video until just a couple years ago, but that was sort of the extension of wanting to tell deeper stories, bigger narratives, have a more visceral experience, because I was out there smelling and tasting and feeling all these things, and I wanted to kind of have a way that compelled people more like they were there with me.
For someone who's traveled to some of the coolest places ever, how did you manage the pandemic?
The pandemic was really challenging, in many ways, not because it was hard on me because I couldn't travel, but just the fact that work was kind of evaporating, and I had to really rethink myself. And luckily, I've always really been focused on not trying to throw all my eggs into one basket and have books and films and other things people can enjoy. But I really tried to focus in on where I could travel, where was accessible. So I was actually able to spend a little bit of time in Japan right before the pandemic hit, and then I was in Alaska. I did a shoot there once some of the travel bans lifted, and I also went to Iceland on a special exemption permit to do a big trip there. It was something where I really started to realize just how important traveling is, and I realized in that moment, like, I never want to take this for granted ever again. I think that in some way I tended to, and others tend to just take it for granted. And I think right now I'm really grateful for what those opportunities have afforded me. And nowadays I just, any trip I can go somewhere, I'm usually there a bit longer because I know that, like, I might not be able to be back here for a while. So I'm really trying to make the most of it.
So cool. What was your first camera?
My first camera was actually a borrowed camera from my girlfriend at the time, now wife. Her mom. It was an old Canon, like AE1, I think, metal, big hippie strap. Then I upgraded to a Nikon N90S that I bought, film camera, and then I eventually got a Canon 20D, and then yada yada yada. I went from there, and nowadays I'm shooting Sony mirrorless digital, and honestly, seeing what cameras can do nowadays compared to when I started, it blows my mind almost every day. I feel like there was a time where every year I was like, can't they just do this? Like, when are they gonna get better? And nowadays I'm like, I don't even know what else I would want. I mean, the quality, the sensors, everything is so next level that it kind of has blown my mind.
And I think everybody wants to know, what's your go-to camera and lens?
What's my go-to camera and lens now? Well, the Sony A1 is hands down like maybe the most beautiful camera I've ever used. The most just incredible, intuitive piece of equipment. The 16-35 lens is still my favorite lens, just because I love that intimate, wide perspective. I love being able to, zoom out to 16 and get close to my subject. That's when you get those really raw, authentic moments, I feel like, as opposed to kind of being far away and just zooming in. I also, tend to use the R4 still a lot as kind of a daily workhorse. The S3 is a good night camera, but A1 is for sure kind of my, that's like the unicorn. That's the one I look forward to, and I want to create something really special.
You do so much more than just photography. You're also a filmmaker. Tell me about your film projects.
Films kind of originated from this idea, again, that I wanted to just tell more deep and meaningful stories. I was going on trips for magazines back in the day, surf magazines, going to Russia or Alaska, and I was like, this is such a wasted opportunity if we can't make a film from it too. And so a lot of times I would come along trying to direct the film, like just trying to sit in kind of the sort of executive seat directing the creative vision while shooting images. I've never been somebody to pick up a camera and film myself. I've always tried to just direct, and I think that's the role I love the most. I love working on the big creative vision and working with talented people, working with friends and filmmakers, music people, editors, producers, et cetera, to bring about a really good project. And so I think for me, Nowadays, I'm always looking for, what I typically do when it comes to a good story is I'm like, here's a great story. What's the best way to tell this? Is it me just telling a story in person? Is it taking pictures and sharing a visual journey like that? Is it making a film out of it and really bringing this thing to life in that way? And so I think that film and cinematography was born out of necessity to tell deeper and more meaningful stories from those experiences.
One of my favorite things that you do is the way that you capture the textures of the earth. How do you go about finding that perfect angle to capture that surreal look?
The textures, yeah, I mean, that's like that's the thing I love the most. I think why is because anytime I'm capturing texture, I'm often honing in on just a small piece. And I know that sometimes these are like huge mile-wide rivers, but if you're in the air, you're really just kind of zooming in or honing in on this one tiny piece. A lot of times I've shot textures of waves, right? Just like the lip of a wave or the surface or the pattern of wood. Why I love it is that it's like retraining my brain to think in a different way, trying to almost experience something or document something that normally I would never see. Normally I would never care as much about. And so I think what I look for is typically finding those textures comes from studying that landscape, having been in that landscape before. It's never just like, oh, there it is, let's shoot it. It's typically, I'm at a place near my home and I know that at low tide this estuary looks really interesting, and so I plan it out and I go there and I find the right tools. Sometimes it's a matter of just shooting right at your feet, the ocean or the tide coming up. Sometimes it's being in a plane or with a drone. And so I feel like hunting down those textures is like an expertise. It's another language, and I've tried to really learn that language over the years.
From landscapes to wildlife to extreme conditions to aerials, what is your favorite thing to capture?
Oh man, that's a tough one because I love it all. And I would say definitely in the past couple of years, aerial photography has become like this deep passion of mine where being able to experience your own backyard in a new way, see familiar roads in a new way from the air, like it makes you appreciate where you're from or where you live. Makes you appreciate landscapes you've seen maybe 1,000 times in a new way. But to be honest, it's not so much about the most extreme or the most cold or the most unique. It's about any image or landscape that lets somebody look at it and feel inspired to want to be there. Even if the opportunity for them to, travel to this remote place isn't possible, that feeling, that sensation that there's more out there and that they can in some way revel in this, just the beauty of nature for even a second if they're behind a cubicle. Like that's what I aim to share. I started shooting photographs because, and coming home and sharing them with my mom and my dad who were at home, and I wanted them to appreciate these places. And so nowadays I still photograph with the same purpose, with the goal of letting people appreciate these places who maybe can't get there, or maybe haven't been able to go, or who maybe want to go. And that's really what it always will boil down to me, and that's what I hope to really bring to people.
You've gained a whopping over 3 million followers on Instagram. It's amazing how you can use your voice to advocate for the things that you believe in. So how has social media helped you forward your career?
Social media is such an interesting tool, and I'd be lying if I didn't say in some way it didn't actually really benefit my career. Luckily, I was fully, engaged in photography, shooting for commercial clients, working on staff for a magazine for about 10 years prior to even getting a Facebook or Instagram account. And then when I did, I guess the reason I found so much success is because it just became an extension of that storytelling. These articles and these projects I was doing for the magazine, all of a sudden now I had a bigger place to share. I had more people to share it to, and that's always been the impetus of why I've used it. I want to tell you my perspective. I want to tell you what I saw and heard and felt, not just the writer or the journalist who was with me. And so when I was able to finally kind of utilize social media as this tool, or see it as this tool, like this is my own personal magazine, I fell in love with the process. I fell in love with the platform, and I think in many ways this is why I really just cherish it today.
You're also a Sony brand ambassador. Tell me what that means to you.
So I'm a Sony global imaging ambassador, and to be honest, utilizing their gear for the last couple of years has been amazing because I was an early adopter to the Sony system. I've been using it for maybe like 8-9 years. Before, I remember giving the files from my Sony to my editor way back in the day, and he was like, what are these? Like, I don't even know how to work with these. I just loved the system because they were the only ones pushing the envelope of making things smaller. And the smaller the camera was, the further I could take it. The more easy it was to charge and be portable with, the further I could take it. So it was allowing me to be in places that before weren't possible with a camera. And that's why I fell in love. And then really giving myself to this system, being like, I'm all in, it's opened amazing doors for me. And the Sony family has allowed me to tell stories and to work on amazing projects with them. And I just feel so honored that they would consider me as somebody worthy enough to like use their cameras and help represent them.
Do you have any projects you're working on or coming up?
There's always projects, there's always something in the works right now. We're actually finishing up and starting to work on another film that we shot from a trip we did to Iceland a couple weeks ago, and then after that I've got another couple of kind of personal projects, some bike rides I'm doing. I'm working on a big film about my winter expedition bikepacking trip through Iceland that was with myself and Rebecca Rush and Gus Morton, so that's fun. But there's always like plates and they're all spinning, right? And I'm trying to just manage all of them and give my time to as many of them as I can.
Okay, switching it up a little bit. What are some tips for somebody who's looking to capture nature and textures in the way that you do?
I think if you want to spend time capturing nature and you want to find those textures, I think the key thing is really just you have to kind of become a student of these places. Study them, research them, give your time to them. Like you don't just find out interesting and unique places by simply just showing up and like looking around and roaming down some random trail. I really try to study and understand and become a student of the places that I'm going to go to, especially if it's a job or especially if it's a place that's really exciting to me. I want to know as much as I can about it, and then by knowing as much as I can, when I'm there, I can let my guard down and I can just allow the moment to happen and allow that to kind of come naturally. So I don't know, I guess that's my tip or trick for trying to really experience those places and find that texture.
Awesome. All right, some fun questions. What has been one of the coolest shoots you've ever been on?
One of the coolest shoots I've been on for sure was a trip we did to the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. We did a project for it was a nature conservancy group, and I'm blanking on the name right now, but we basically were able to document the Alaska Marine Wildlife Sanctuary that's in the Aleutian Islands, and we documented all these volcanoes from the air. It was kind of one of the largest aerial surveys that had been done on the area, and the photos were just, they're so powerful. Like seeing these beautiful volcanoes, we got crazy conditions because it was clear and cold outside and it wasn't foggy, which is normally really cloudy and foggy. And so we kind of got this once in a lifetime opportunity, and to see these active volcanoes driving straight out of the ocean, like 6,000 feet, Mount Cleveland and Mount Carlisle and all these. It felt like we were coming back from another planet and bringing the images to people to see. And I still don't think people quite fully digest or comprehend the rarity of that experience, but that was one of the ones where I was shooting photos, and at the same time I was almost like in tears, just like so emotional about what we were seeing. And I guess it's hard in some way to relate the power of that moment through a small caption or through an image, but I try.
And in your career, what has been one of the most challenging shoots you've been on?
I would say in my career, one of the more challenging shoots, it wasn't the great adventure stories. It wasn't the surf trips. It was probably the big commercial shoots that I've done in the past for, maybe like a Corona or someone like that, where you have 60 people just kind of on hand waiting, holding lights and scrims and everything, and PAs and talent and this and I think the challenge with a lot of those shoots is, and this is the work that I don't really share much of, is because it's more of the behind the scenes work, the stuff you do to make money, the stuff you do to keep your roof on, is that the stress that comes with that. You're pouring so much time and energy into this small window of time that you have to get the shot, you have to get it. And I remember this one particular shoot, there was lightning and people were out on boats holding huge lights, like basically a lightning rod. We had to cancel the shoot early, and I just felt so bad because it was like people were being put at risk and it was really scary. We were down in Mexico. And I just thought, this is so crazy. I've been all over the world. I've been in some of the gnarliest conditions I could imagine, and this is the place where I'm gonna have a shoot kind of be shut down because of weather, right? It was just mind-blowing to me. But yeah, that was probably one of the most challenging.
So I see a lot of alpaca content on your page. So what's the story behind this, and how many do you have?
I have 4 alpacas, 2 babies, an Icelandic sheep as well. And you know, they're just these lovable, rad animals that we got because I own a couple acres of property, and in California you need to be fire aware, you need to be kind of fire defensive, so we needed to get something to kind of mow down this grass on this property, and alpacas seemed like the right call because they were good with kids and they poop in one spot and you can use their fiber for all kinds of rad stuff, and so we got them, and we've kind of been in love ever since. They're awesome critters, and you know, definitely nowadays they've kind of taken on the role of like pets more so than ever, but yeah, they bring a lot of joy to our life and a lot of other people's.
All right, short and sweet. Would you rather shoot photography in summer or winter?
Winter, for sure. I think that winter provides these solemn, quiet moments that you don't normally see, because summer is more favorable. Conditions are easier. You're gonna see a lot of content coming out of summer, but winter, there's this something, I don't know, something kind of hidden about it. It's more mysterious to me.
Now, would you rather shoot in the ocean or the mountains?
Oh man, I could never answer that question. I mean, the ocean is my favorite canvas. It always will be. It's the first one I ever shot. But the mountains have brought me so much respect and humility to just like nature itself. It can be so raw and so rough. I think right in between, the place where there's a lot of vertical relief, where the oceans meet the mountain, that's the sweet spot for me. That's where I want to be. I want to be at the place where I can see the mountains, but I can smell the sea. Like that's to me where all the magic happens.
If you could only use one lens forever, which would it be?
16 to 35 millimeter f2.8 for sure, with a polarizer.
And if you weren't a photographer or filmmaker, what would you be?
I would be a geologist if I wasn't a photographer or filmmaker. I love rocks. I love knowing how a landscape was formed, and when I'm taking pictures, I'm often trying to guess or estimate, or I don't know, just look and understand about how this landscape was created. I'm so intrigued by that, and I love having an understanding of what I'm shooting. This crazy mountain range or this crazy lava flow or whatever it is, why is it like that? Why does it look like that? I think that photography for me kind of gives some hints or a little unveils a little bit of the mystery about how these landscapes were created, and I love that.
All right, this one's fun. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece of advice I've ever received is being a dad is not an old man's job. Now that doesn't have anything to do with photography, but it's the truth. Somebody told me that about having kids, and so I took that seriously. But I think one of the better pieces of advice is like, you don't need to be good at everything, especially when it comes to photography or being creative. Like, you're hired because you're a specialist, and you're hired because you're the best at something or a couple things, right? You don't need to go in and show your portfolio to somebody and be like, look, I can do portraits and weddings and landscapes and product photography and animals. Nobody was ever hired because they're decent at everything. They're hired because they're the best at something. And I think the quicker we learn to hone our skills and sharpen our kind of set of knives so that we have a really powerful skill set, the better we'll be.
Now, in the field or just day-to-day use, what is your favorite piece of gear?
Favorite piece of gear for sure is the iPhone. I mean, or a phone in general, like a smartphone, right? Like the ability to be able to research, look at topography maps, understand trail systems, look for images, take photos, video. There's nothing more powerful that I use to tell stories than the phone. And the truth of the matter is, I take more photos on my phone than I do on my camera in any given year. It's a tool for scouting, it's a tool for experiencing, it's a tool for sharing. And I think that it's probably one of the greatest inventions for like a modern day storyteller. And the fact that people can, if I didn't have any of this camera equipment, would I still be a photographer? Would I still be a storyteller? I would say yes, because the ability to share an intimate experience, it's not beholden to the equipment you're using. It's about how willing you are to kind of share what it's like to be out there, how willing you are to kind of translate your experience to others. And I think that the phone can do an amazing job.
And who do you think we should interview next?
Oh man. You should interview my friend Gina Danza. You should interview her. she's a rad wildlife, landscape, and kind of macro photographer out of Arizona. You should check her out. She does rad work and kind of takes on really unique perspectives for some of these landscapes that I've really never seen that perspective from before. And so I think that's maybe somebody who I think would have a totally different view than myself into her work and her workflow. And yeah, check it out.
Amazing. All right, so thank you so much for taking the time, and I'll let you get back to your studio.
Stoked. Cheers.